Hands
His ankle there,
from
nice,
big
nice
left kick. Here comes Jordan
come back with those hands again.
Leads into our last fight as well. So Petchmorakot, Petchmorakot was the current champ versus the challenger Jimmy Vienot from France, and lots of controversy on this fight. Controversy, but this is also one of those things again that you can see the gap closing between I guess Westerner to Thailand kind of mind frame. Because Jimmy Vienot looked fucking awesome.
Yeah, let me just before we get into, I want to see where the listeners are at from the Instagram poll.
Put the poll up.
Yeah.
Let's see the ratio of what
I think I know what the
for yay and
consensus
nay.
was.
So this is when you put up what did you think of the decision?
Yeah, the vast majority disagreed.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, a lot of answers. But there were some agreements as well. I won't name anyone who messaged through, but interesting one. But the 3-1 majority of the listeners thought Jimmy got gypped.
Yeah. So if let's look at the rounds a little bit. I think everyone's in agreement. 1, 2, 5.
Jimmy.
Pretty clear. Yeah, Jimmy. And then the third round, Petchmorakot came back to strong.
The swing round, right? That was the round where Petchmorakot started to be
and then you can talk.
I got to fight this dude.
And then then the fourth one is where the knockdown happened, but that goes into the thing of is it an automatic 10-8?
And this is a bit to get into here. So, on watching this fight, I scored it for Jimmy. But I do think there are a couple of considerations that make this fight close. To me, I actually do believe this was a fairly close fight when you really look into it. So, 1 and 2, I think I haven't really spoken to anyone who scored those for Petchmorakot. 3 was pretty close to the point where you could almost you could probably make an argument for a 10-10. I'd have to watch it really closely but that's a fight. I believe I've talked to a lot of people that were 1, 2, 3 clear as day. Jimmy, I don't really agree with that. I think 3 was a bit of a swing round and maybe could have been a draw. I was probably leaning Jimmy's way, but it's also you got to resist some natural kind of bias will come out when you're watching a fight, because that was around where Petchmorakot started to push back and that could almost make the distinct change in Petchmorakot's approach and demeanor could make you credit him more for that round. It can make you kind of be a little bit more of an emotional response. Yeah, exactly. When I actually think Jimmy was still doing most of what he was doing in rounds 1 and 2, just with a little bit more opposition from Petchmorakot.
Yeah.
Round 4, this is, as you say, an interesting one to discuss because the commentators on one always say knockdown means 10-8 round. And sometimes, for example, I remember in Glory Kickboxing, that was a hard and fast rule. If there is an 8 count, it's a 10-8 round. That was written. In Muay Thai scoring, as I understand it, it's not a guaranteed 10-8 because you scored an 8 count. For example, if you soundly lose the majority of a round and then knock someone down, you've probably just battled back for a 10-9 when you're looking at cumulative damage. Knockdown versus the rest of the round. This fight, the way the commentators presented it again, was 10-8, but I've been told that even in one championship, you don't have to give a 10-8 round.
Okay.
And then, so I don't know if I've ever had 100% clarity on that for how it is scored in one. But if I was scoring this on the outside, would I have given it a 10-8? I don't know. It was, there's probably an argument for it.
Would you consider more like an off balancing or a flash than
it was a knockdown. He was clipped and it was a mad punch, but you could see that it was not. Maybe in a stadium or something, the way that Vienot hopped straight back up, you would have just chock. Yeah. Because he was good. You could see, and that's kind of how you'll score off the 8 counts as well. I think it was a good 8 count, but you look, he still had it together when he popped right back up. There was no ongoing damage from that knockdown. He got right back in the fight and started fighting started to maybe the best argument for him snatching that round back to a 10-9 was beyond the knockdown. So I think you've got to consider that. Like a knockdown is not all knockdowns are the same. So as a judge, you've got to look at the overall impact beyond the actual count. And Jimmy was okay, and he came back, was very active, landed well. So it's an argument for a 10-9. And then the fifth round, like Petchmorakot seemed to just be protecting his lead, his perceived lead, I suppose. Yeah. But Jimmy was still, it's one of those fights where you've got to look at this like, it's not like Petchmorakot was protecting a lead by controlling Jimmy, keeping him around, kicking him away, so much as just choosing to not engage and trying to kind of dance the fight off. So Jimmy was still landing, was still pushing Petchmorakot back. It's just that Petchmorakot would respond by just moving away, which doesn't void Jimmy's points because Petchmorakot's choosing not to fight him. Jimmy's still kicking that leg.
Yeah.
Still letting
Still got to fight in that last round.
Yeah. So I would give the fifth round. Again, it was a pretty close one. Like just a bit less happened. I think actually both guys were kind of trying to
protect a little bit.
But I thought Jimmy landed more and more cleanly, like was more engaging with more scoring blows as opposed to Petchmorakot, who was just trying to do everything he could to not fight. So I think for me, upon a first review, I thought 1, 2, 5. I thought 1, 2, 5 cleared Jimmy. I probably could have given Jimmy 3 as well. But I think, okay, so the point that I'm making from the beginning is that there's probably a reasonable argument for a draw.
Yeah.
And in one, there are no draws. So I feel at this point that so where that draw would come from would be 1, 2, 5 Jimmy. If you swung for Petchmorakot, third, and then gave him a 10-8.
Yeah, knocked down in the fourth.
So of course in a one Super Series fight, there's no draws, which I actually think is kind of cool. I don't really like draws. But I think they could be a bit clearer about the sudden death scoring criteria. Because and then like if you're black and white about it, great. Because I think in this case you're just going, okay, first order of business, did anyone score a knockdown? Okay, give it to them. That's okay. It'll give you some weird scores, but if you are really just trying to go no draws whatsoever, okay, that's fine. But you just got to let us know.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Because I also find that they don't announce. I would like to see them announce when it is a draw that's gone to what do you call it? You know, like because I would like to say Judge 1 scored it, 47-47 and then as a, like, because it just gets a little bit more confusing. I would like to see the scoring kind of reworded to give you a tiered system of because basically it doesn't make any sense to say in the event that you cannot pick a winner, pick a winner. Right, like that's what it is. Like in the event that the fight is too close to call, just come up with who won. Because it makes me wonder if there is a way to split it, because that's what you're saying to the judges. If you score it a draw, split it at the end. If it can be split, why is it a draw? You know what I mean? Like maybe you should have scored the rounds differently. But also I think you can just do a tiered system of like, okay, if you reach the end of the fight and your scorecard is a draw, here is the criteria. And maybe this exists, but I haven't seen it. And you could be number 1, did anyone score a knockdown? Yeah. Number 2, were there any major fouls? Number 3, and that's where you can start. That would maybe make it more sense. I do just think this is a fight where I see it going Jimmy's way. Yes, but I also think it was like you have to acknowledge that this was really close, and there's a couple of scoring kind of criteria rules at play. Like when you really look at the numbers, even though it appeared that Jimmy was winning the majority of the fight in terms of time, once you factor in damage and like potential drawn rounds, it is pretty close. It was interesting. Like I think it's tricky with one that we see these really high end fights, and it feels like we're talking about scoring. every single time,
Yeah, because it's not clear or it's not laid out.
which makes it kind of exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny. Jimmy's had 2 funny ones in a row because he got that win over your Witcher, I remember.
Ah, yeah. Maybe it's just karma.
Well, that's what I always talk about. I've seen this heaps of times. I always talk about robbery karma. I feel like every time someone wins a marquee fight that they should have lost, same thing happens in reverse.
It goes the other way. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a few things to because there's other like factors as well. And like I think the biggest thing for Jimmy fought a really, really good fight. And especially in the early rounds, I thought the way he framed Petchmorakot's offense, like kick that outside leg.
Smash that leg.
Yeah. Load that big left kick up and run him over the top. Like some really nice, like a really nice angle through like a left cross just over the top. Because Petchmorakot's been really bullying guys around with that jab. Like he's been boxing a lot recently. And you can kind of see that coming out in his more aggressive kind of new one championship style because he was much more of a Muay Thai fighter.
Yeah. Which kind of blends both well into his style.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought Jimmy just had a good couple of answers to that. And then, of course, just finishing everything with those sweeps. Really threw Petchmorakot over. Maybe 10 times.
Yeah, with those sweeps as well. Like, Ellis had to warn him a few times, but he was hooking the leg a fair bit.
Does
that factor into anything at all?
That's the other thing I think is an important consideration is that as a viewer, you're looking and saying, okay, there's quite a strong visual to sweeping over and over again. And there was a million of them. And like sweeps on their own don't necessarily score big. They can definitely be a difference maker. And in this case, I thought they were big or authoritative sweeps. Like he's really just tossing, like showing a strength advantage from those sweeps. However, there were a number of illegal sweeps where he kind of just plowed forward and took more than the allowed 2 steps or hooked the leg. There are a couple of leg hooks. And as a judge, you have to be watching for what you don't credit. So whereas a viewer, because it was paid by the commentators, but Elias was super on top of it, best ref there is, warning Jimmy. And it's why you have to be like an official rather than just a ref or a judge, because you have to have the perspective to not score the sweeps that are not quite legal. So there was a lot of legal sweeps, but there was a couple of fouls. And my question is, did that factor in to the judging where they kind of taking some credit away from those sweeps? But then again, like most of the rounds, even when there were some illegal ones, like Jimmy was doing all the work.
Yeah, he was doing all the damage.
It's interesting. What I find the most interesting is like one is so built around their Thai stars, but it's not stadium fighting. And I thought Petchmorakot really fought this fight like a stadium fight because if you took this to be like, even though Jimmy was winning those first 2 rounds, if you just score them as draws, that makes a big difference. And of course, the 4th round is the big one. And Petchmorakot, like looking at this from like a stadium perspective, and if you look at that, you kind of view the way Petchmorakot fought this fight through that lens. Yeah, he probably did win that fight because it's like almost a 1-round fight. He draws round 1 and 2, battled back 3, clear, drop. Like if you drop a guy in the 4th round in Thailand, like
it's done.
You just protect it. Yeah, and that's what he did. And in the 5th round, he probably wouldn't really pay. You'd be viewing it as like, you've really got to snatch it back to take away from that knockdown rather than in like more of a Western approach to scoring. You'd be paying what Jimmy was doing because at the end of the day, he was still landing well in that 5th round. Like again, 5th round was close. 3rd round was close. 4th was, of course, Petchmorakot. There's a couple of like just how you interpret scoring kind of things at play. But yeah, upon watching, I thought Jimmy was the better fighter of the 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, Petchmorakot. I don't know. It's interesting. Interesting to see. I guess like my take is, I'm with you guys. I thought Jimmy probably won this, but I also do think there are a couple of factors I need to review on my understanding of scoring in general, especially as it goes in one championship. But also, like, it was a close fight. Yeah. It was a close fight. I think that's before we start to get too conspiratorial. this was a very, very close fight. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good fight as well. And then, yeah, we'll see. Well, there's this one. It's like same thing. As Chachi goes, need a rematch.
Is that what they're going to do? Is that what they said?
Well, no, just on the the Chachi timeline. A lot of times with these type of fights,
it
seemed like a lot of outcry.
I hope that's what they do.
Hey.
Send it to Chachi's fucking imaginary board to overturn, but unfortunately, that doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen
when the non-tie wins. No, actually, it does because it happened to Petchmorakot. Right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yes.